Wanted to ask you, because as you know, when I see kicking related things, I obviously always think of you now. And I feel like ever since we've started this show, there's been one big kicking thing a week. And this week it was the Coup Phantom kick. And I saw a lot of people, I read an article on The Athletic about it and different theories, but I thought there's no better person to get their theory on than a 15-year Pro Bowl kicker. So I'm curious what your thoughts were as you were watching that, either live or the video afterwards.
Yeah, so immediately, as soon as I saw it, I could tell that he thought the tip of the ball was sliding and the ball was going to fall over. And that's why he pulled up. And honestly, like, I've done that in practice before. I think a lot of guys who kick a football, if the snap and hold isn't perfect and you think the ball is going to fall over, you know that you're going to kick it into the back of your line and it's not going to go your way. It's going to be a bad thing. So he pulled up. Like, a lot of people seem to think he just hit the ground and his leg stopped. That does not happen. Like, as kickers, we've hit the ground before and our foot continues to move forward. Like, he definitely pulled up and did not finish the kick. So it's definitely like he just flinched, you know. It's like one of those things, like if he'd have kicked through it, it would have been fine, but he flinched. And unfortunately, like, it looks really bad, and it's just bad ball. And I think you have to have a contingency plan for that. And I actually used to have a drill that I would do where I would do a little hesitation and kind of like drop step and kick step, and I would do a one-step kick after that to be able to stay smooth and not panic, because psychologically you want to always be like inside of some sort of a process or rhythm. And if you practice those situations, you can actually pull through those uncharted waters, and they don't seem uncharted because you've actually practiced them before.
That's one of the things that I'm definitely learning about you the more we talk about kicking scenarios. You had a contingency plan for everything, seemingly. You always were, it seemed like you wanted, because you can't know, it seems like 99% of the time it largely goes the same, but that's from the fan perspective. This led me to, researching this issue led me to a video where Jake Elliott was covering the whole, which I want to talk about this eventually, but basically the whole process of long snapper to holder to his kick and the different angles of the ball depending on where the wind is coming from and the distance of the kick, and that was a very interesting video. And you could do, we could do some good segments on that, and probably will when we can kind of spread out and talk about this stuff more, especially in the off season. But it was interesting to see that video and just get a small amount of the knowledge that you have, and then I get that from you every week. But there were some interesting theories going around about this, because I saw some people saying, well, he buried his foot into the ground so that he wouldn't record a miss, and so now it's a sack on the holder instead of him missing, because it would have been his first kick missed in New York. And I'm thinking that seemed like kind of an odd theory. And like you said, I mean, shoot, if you kicked the ground with the force that you normally kicked and didn't kick through or whatever, I mean, I'd be worried about an injury if you were kicking with that kind of force. So
exactly. If you hit the ground that hard that it stops your foot, you're talking about probably ripping your rector femoris off the freaking bone. Like that is not a normal thing to happen. I mean, even think about this when we golf. How many times do we chunk behind the ball when we golf and we just rip a big piece of turf up and we still kind of fluff under the ball? It doesn't completely stop our swing. So that is how you have to kind of see it. Like, and do I think he was trying to avoid a recorded? Your brain can't work that fast. I'm sorry. Like
that's what I was thinking.
as much as I've studied psychology, I know that the brain works in certain processes, and it will never work that fast to compute that behavior. Like the visceral access of that movement and that response is impossible.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I'm thinking, man, you're giving this guy way too much credit, and there's no way that a kicker that has kind of bounced around a little bit is going to be that concerned with that piece of it, because that's not going to help him at all. If he's burying that and stopping that kick to keep up his streak, the team is not going to take kindly to that. That is not going to help him and his future in the NFL at all. The part that you said about stopping it and kind of recorrecting for the reason of, hey, I don't want to hit a lineman with this, or I don't want to put it in play where it can be returned, that's a lot more plausible than, oh, I don't want my statistics to be affected here.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess my life has revolved around it. So, like, for me, it's easy to take that for granted. And I always try to make sure in all my thought process, I never take things for granted. So when you look at how I see it, you know that his job is to make the kick and kick through the ball and extend to his target and all those kinds of things. And it's like something made him flinch, and it was him seeing the ball look like the bottom of the tip was going to slip out from under the ball and it was going to fall over to the right. And honestly, I saw that movement when they had a super close slow motion zoom in. I saw that movement, and I knew that's exactly what he had to have thought. And then apparently he gave an interview, and that's what he said. So I kind of already predicted and knew that. But it's like, I think when we don't see that as the average lay person, it's easy for us to take for granted, like, the ball looked perfect, why didn't he kick it? And that's all people see. But I really think that it was just an instinct that just happened in such a split moment that it just looked bad. And, you know, you have to have a contingency plan. That's all I can really say is you when you live in the process and you live in the moment, you have to have a contingency plan so that you have a process for that moment.
That's one of the most fascinating things, like I said, that I learn every week when we talk about this, that it's just that there's a contingency plan for everything with you when you were playing, and it makes sense because you do get more time. You get a lot of time on the sidelines to go through this stuff and time in practice to go through this stuff. So although you want to kick, I'm sure there's a limit to how much you're going to kick, because it's like, okay, yeah, I need to practice a certain amount. I need to make sure I've got these situations down, but really it's planning for what else can happen, because you can only go through the motions and exercise those muscles so many times in a given practice window or whatever you're trying to do, training window. You've got to work on other things in addition to honing your primary skill.
Absolutely. And you know, one of the biggest things about programming your brain is repetition is the only way to truly build habit. And when we talk about having a contingency plan for when things don't always go the way you want them to go, is you have to practice things not going the way you want them to go. And none of us ever want to do that. That's in life in general, right? Like you never want to think that things aren't going to go perfect, but you have to be ready for those moments. And in a situation like that, it's almost like, how many times can I practice the perfect situation? Yes. When you see kickers, if you look on YouTube and you look up kickers and you look on social media, you see kickers kicking in practice or, you know, posting their own videos of their training. It's typically this little metal stick holder device that holds the ball sitting still perfectly. It's probably sitting there for about a minute before you kick it. And it's like in a game, you have 1.29 seconds from snap to kick to get everything figured out. And the only way you can do it is to program yourself, and you have to create a process of sensory adaptation. That means you get so used to creating the scenarios that your body gets used to it, and it just becomes a habit, and it's just like getting in cold water and the water gets warm. You have to get so used to it that it's normal.
I get that. Yeah, that's a good description, because a lot of this is psychological versus it's the combination, psychological and physical. So that's a great explanation of that. I noticed I got the game pulled up here. The Lions are driving. We got to take a quick break. Hopefully they can continue to drive into the break. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about, we talked about a different kick, but I wanted to talk about the kick off and and kind of how things have changed a little bit, because you're talking about the repetition, but now the goals of the kickoff are a little bit different. So I want to talk about that, and hopefully maybe we'll have a score by the time we come back from break. But stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM. We did have a score just then, but it was a Jake Bates kick, so very apropos for our show, Shayne, that we got a field goal to kick things off, but at least they're on the scoreboard. I'm wondering, I know you probably haven't studied the nuances of the new kickoffs like you did in your day, because you don't have to study it quite as much, but it has occurred to me, we were having that discussion about the repetition of things, and I feel like when you were kicking off, I'm sure there was a bunch of things that you were working on, directionality, and you were probably trying to play away from some of the returners. Now with this whole landing zone thing, it's a lot different, because you can't just necessarily kick it right through the end zone. You want to kind of place it a little bit more. So I'm curious how you kind of have seen the evolution of the kickoff, because there hasn't been a lot of focus on that, but it has been evolving, and I think probably will continue to evolve, because they're trying to figure out the right balance of having the ability to have the kickoff be an important play in the game, but also reduce the inherent contact that happens on every kickoff and kickoff return.
Yeah, and when you put the rules in there that mean the automatic touchback brings the ball out as far as it does, it kind of takes the ROI away from it. So, like, you're really not getting a whole lot of return on putting not to say pun, but you're not getting like the value for it. So yes, you want to try to take that little bit of a risk and let them get a return, but try to pin them. And what you're seeing is that kickers are not trying to kick it as hard as they normally do. They're usually only taking about 3 steps away from the ball versus the full 7 to 8, 9, 10 yard run up they normally do to try to kick it as far as they can. But the big thing is the way that they're trying to eliminate that contact is by moving the players up the field and then starting them at a 5 yard separation with 0 speed progression. So you used to have guys that could have a 10 yard head start run, and then the ball would be kicked right as they try to time it up to be about a yard behind the ball as it's kicked. They're almost full speed at that point. So you got guys running 50 yards full speed before they even reach the first blocker that's trying to block them. So in that situation, now you've got guys that are trying to dip, rip, whip, inside, outside, whatever their leverage that they're trying to get to avoid the blocker. It's done at such a slow speed that it's hard to really kind of manipulate with deep moves and using speed moves. It's really hard to manipulate that at such a slow speed. So you're almost getting a blocker has the opportunity to make contact so easily that it could be an advantage for the return team, but yet it's hard to really, without having the open space and the placement of where your strategic blockers are located and what direction they're running from to try to create the angles and the blocks, it makes it really difficult. And it's almost like an ISO run play. And it's just try to create some sort of delay in the coverage man's run, and then let the returner play off of what angles and leverages he sees come open. And it's tough. It really is.
That was a great description of that whole process. This is one of the things, like I said, that I'm excited to get into as we go into the off season. Not that I'm preparing for that quite yet. Hopefully we have a lot of season left, including playoffs, depending on how this game and the rest of the season goes. But there's just so much nuance to this that I think you are helping people understand, because I do have, I think, more interest in the kicking part than maybe the average fan, but I think this will help raise the level of interest because there's so much nuance to it. But I think it's the lack of understanding that's kind of the tough part for the fan. Is it's not that they don't like the kicking, it's that they don't understand. It just ends up looking kind of the same because you guys have such an expertise that it ends up looking pretty similar, but there's so much nuance to it. So when you then factor in all the things you have to deal with and you're talking about all this, it adds a lot of nuance that people go, oh wait, yeah, that was actually very complex, even though I saw the same thing that I normally see. There was a very complex array of butterfly effect scenarios that could have happened there. Once you understand that, then that's helpful. And
do you know the distance of like the slight like micro distance of the way that ball moved that created that whole scenario was probably 1 centimeter to 1 inch.
That's,
so like,
yeah,
being able to see that is just so hard to do for the average person that doesn't look at that every single day with a microscope.
Exactly, and you have such an in-depth knowledge of it. So yeah, it's just very interesting. The part that I'm really lamenting, I haven't gotten your take on this yet. Not that we've had this in the game yet, but Dan Campbell used to use the onside kick to perfection, and I feel like the fact that you could opt to have one at any time really worked well with his level of aggression, that he could just kind of in the middle of the second quarter flip an onside kick in there and surprise people. Are you one? I kind of lament that you have to then show your hand on that. I like that you had the option to do that as a kicker, and then you'd then have to disguise that as a kicker and figure that out. But I'm curious if you kind of lament that being out of the game, or say, yeah, well, they're crashing into each other, I guess this makes sense in the modern day.
I mean, you don't have a ton of speed built up, but yet, yes, it is a collision. But let's be honest. Look at receivers run. Are they going to start banning, inside crossing routes because receivers get banged across the middle? Well, you look at the onside kick. The surprise onside kick has such a higher percentage of recovery rate that you're talking about if you look at the direction that you kick the ball, you're talking about a 5-man versus typically 2-man side. And the ball's got to be in the right spot, but you're literally going 5-on-2. The way it's set up now, they know it's coming, so they can line up to it. Whatever alignment you put, if you do a 6x4, if you do a 5x5, actually, I think in the NFL you have to go 5x5. So if you go 5x5 on each side of the kicker, they're going to put a man that is going to account for each one of those 5 players, and then the kicker is accounted for in the count to match the returner. So you're in even odds, so the percentages go way down. But when you do a surprise, you're talking about 10 men running down the field with one kicker making 11. Now you've got a 5-man or 6-man front going against 10 people. And if you choose one side or the other, it's 5 versus 2 or 5 versus 3. You're usually going to try to go to the 2-man side. If there's a 5-man front, if there's a 6-man front, it's pick your side, right? Which side is the kicker more likely to hit his best bouncy ball to? But when you create this, hey, here it is, it makes it really tough, and the percentages are super low.
Yeah, I think that's the tough part for me, is it takes the nuance out of it. I get that some of it is a contact related thing, but I do think there still needs to be the ability to strategize in there, especially from the kicking side. All that stuff that you just described, you're taking a lot of that out of it, and it'd be nice for the special teams coaches, the Dave Phipps of the world you used to coach as well, to have to be able to do that or be able to do that, just period. But it's an interesting description. I've been meaning to ask you that. We got to take another quick break here, but now the Cowboys have the ball back. They're appropriately taking a kick here, so we'll get the result of that, and we got two good kickers in this game to talk about with Shayne. But we'll come back with Shayne Graham after the break. Stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM. Appropriately enough, we just got another field goal. Are we only going to have field goals while we're on the air with you? I feel like this is booked very appropriately here, since the NFL is able to book everything in advance and it's all scripted. They've scripted 2 field goals for us.
That's perfect.
Do you chuckle at this stuff when people say, because it's funny to me, I was never involved in the game, but people like you that have been involved in the game for so long, how do you react when people are like, oh, well, the NFL is scripted? That's quite the performance that you guys put on. You needed to win, instead of a Pro Bowl, you needed to win an Academy Award for the performance you guys all put on.
Oh, it blows my mind. Like listen, there's always going to be human error. There's always, excuse me. There's always going to be the potential that there, maybe somebody got to or whatever. But to say there's a script, I mean, there's some words I could use about that I'm going to not use, but these guys are playing for their livelihoods. They're playing for their future careers. They're playing for their jobs. They're playing for their family, and they're playing for their pride. And to think that a player is going to roll over and do some sort of scripted stuff like that is absolutely absurd and asinine. So whenever I hear that and I see it on social media, I have to put my phone down, because I'm so tempted to jump on those conversations, and it's like people aren't going to believe it either way, so it does me no good. But it's like, come on.
Well, that's why I prefer to make fun of it, because it's like, yeah, you can't if that's where you're coming from, that you think that that's plausible, then reasoning with that person is really not going to help, because they're ignoring reason to even have that premise. Maybe they're playing too many video games or something at that point. But because whenever you have that theory with so many people involved, it's like you would be able to keep it quiet that it was scripted with thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that would have to be involved in all of this. It's just funny to me. But I do like that we got two field goals here, and these are 2 good kickers. That was occurring to me because I'm a big Jake Bates fan. I know you are as well, but man, this guy on the other side, he's quite the kicker. So I'm curious how you take him in, because I mean, he is virtually automatic, and he's got leg for days here, Brandon Aubrey.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's one of those anomalies that you have to be impressed with. I mean, he's got a background in soccer like many of us did, but he took that background way longer than most of us did. Most of us gave up soccer in high school and continued as a kicker of some sort, whether we made it to college or not. I know I was very, very fortunate and very blessed, to be honest, to make it where I did. But a guy like him, who never really played college football, played pro soccer, I think. He played pro soccer, am I correct?
I'm not sure if he played pro. I'm gonna pull that up while you're talking.
Or maybe he played soccer in college, but then, kind of made his way through, and he had a great coach that he worked with in Brian Egan in Dallas, Texas, who's a good friend of mine. Really kind of honed him into a guy that has become an absolute weapon for their team, and almost does superhuman feat. Like, it's very humbling when I watch him kick, and I think about if I were kicking at the same time as him, it would be very humbling. And I'll be the first to tell you that I didn't have what he has, and it's impressive. It really is.
Well, that's good of you to admit. I mean, you obviously were in the top 0.1% of that field, but I mean, I think most kickers would probably say the same. I mean, I've heard a lot of kickers in even the current league speak very highly of him. I've got his profile up now. He was drafted by Toronto FC of the Major League Soccer league, and he was, I guess, on the reserve team, and then he moved to Bethlehem Steel FC. But yeah, he was drafted. But this story, because this is the same with Bates too, he was drafted in Major League Soccer, then he moved to the USFL before, which I remember that, but before going to the NFL. And we've talked about this with kind of discovering kickers, and you travel around and you have your school and you're trying to help these young kickers. But it's just amazing to me that some of the top guys in the game, Bates and Aubrey, the two guys in this game, could go kind of unfounded for so long, and he didn't even make it into the league. I forgot how late Aubrey made it into the league as far as his age goes. He's 30 now, and he was signed to the Cowboys in 2023. So basically he's 27, 28 when he gets signed. And that's just amazing to me that such a good kicker could slip through, but you also have the coaching and people developing at different times like you're talking about. So I'm sure that's part of it, as he got with your friend who was his coach and then learned and honed his skills there. But it's amazing that a guy with his skill set went unfounded for so long.
Well, the one thing I can attest to is I know that it's not easy to make it in the NFL. Okay, you are one of 32 people in the world to have that job on a Sunday. And you look at the odds of making it to that, and it's astounding. It took me 2 years out of college. And I can tell you, I worked a ton of part-time jobs. My story's different than his. He got to play, pro soccer before he ended up making it, so he had something else going on. For me, I was working part-time jobs. I mean, part of that time I was living out of my car. And those are the things that people don't really know about me, because that's not really advertised. But I can tell you those are the things I'm the most proud of. And nothing in life is ever going to be easy. And you have to go through struggle. And he did a great job of it. And I'm extremely proud of him for everything he's gone through. But the fact that he was sharpened by that struggle is something that I try to tell people every day when I talk to them, is if you're not sharpened by the struggle that you're given and you're only dulled and dented and scratched, then you have to find a different path, right? Like, you have to be solution oriented. And he did not let the struggle create lethal wounds. He turned that into a polishing, sharpening edge, and that's how you have to see struggle, as something that just sharpens you and makes you better. And that worked for him, and he did a great job of it. But he has overcome so much that it's also been the ability for him to not be afraid of the times that things don't go well. And I kind of beat a dead horse with that subject, but you think about it, that fear of failure that runs in all of us, when you actually get to go through failure a few times, you start to lose that feeling of how bad it feels, and it starts to feel like, you know what, I can get past this, I can beat this. And that's something that I think he's done a great job of.
I don't think this is a dead horse. I like what you're talking about, and inspirational words from Shayne Graham here. I'm really liking this because, yeah, it's the whole diamonds and dust thing. You can turn the pressure can turn you into a diamond, or it can turn you into dust, and a lot of that is up to your level of motivation and stick-to-itiveness to fight through that. But it also speaks to what you were talking about earlier, because you're talking about having to go through the scenarios and understanding, okay, this is what happens when everything goes well, and I have to practice that scenario, but I also have to account for what if something goes wrong, what if the snap goes wrong, what if the hold is off, what if there's wind, what if there's all these other myriad of issues. But it's the same thing with life in general. The ability to have gone through a tough situation and realize that you were up to the task and able to fight through is a huge learning experience that then can make the next time, because like you said, we all hit these these bumps in the road, and the ability to work through them is key, because if you proved it to yourself once, then you can go, okay, yeah, I got through the last thing, then I can get through this too. And especially for a kicker that you kind of have to have nerves of steel, I feel like exercising that particular muscle is very important, because like you said, it doesn't happen overnight, and it usually doesn't happen without some struggle. And so getting through that struggle, understanding you can surpass that and rise above, is an important thing, especially because you're going to have trials and tribulations, even if you have a Pro Bowl career like you did or like he does.
Ryan, I think we need to do a call-in show where we just help people with everyday stuff. You know what I'm saying? Because I enjoy this subject so much because it really hits close to my heart. But when you understand that sometimes those rough patches are what really get us there, it's understanding that I can get through this. I can get through this. It's not so bad. And if it is so bad, I'm going to keep fighting. I'm going to keep fighting. I'm going to get through this. And really just taking all of the steps that it's going to take to get through it, and finding yourself at least reaching up each time. And it sounds so cliche, and sometimes I feel embarrassed and silly when I talk about this, but it's like, if you don't keep at least reaching up, then you're giving up, and you can't give up. You have to keep reaching, and that's just kind of like a life lesson. But it's also like, no one who made it in a pro sport, no one who made it in any kind of success ever just rolled forward and things worked out perfect. And it's tough sometimes, but seeing stories like Jake Bates, I mean, what was he, a bricklayer?
I'm going to have to look that up too. I feel like I know his career pretty well, but I did not remember that part. That before
or a
before
teacher,
the UFL.
Or maybe there was another kicker who was a bricklayer or something. But like, you see these stories of guys that like nothing was going their way, but they kept trying. And honestly, that was me. That was me as well. And when things go your way, I would have never thought there was a certain point where there were people that had given up on me, and I hadn't given up. I still saw the vision, where I was, sleeping in places that were not my home, and still getting up at 5 a.m. to go work out, still working out and going and training in between part-time jobs in the middle of the day, and still not letting myself stop and feel sorry for myself. But then you see the success stories. We all see that when people get drafted, everything works out perfectly. But you don't always see these stories. So when people hear them, they become inspirational. But if you think about it, it's 99% of the world that lives that life. We just only see that 1% that are uber successful, that things seem like they're easy, but even, even they go through struggles. We just don't see it.
Exactly. And I think you say sometimes you feel silly. I think we have to kind of destigmatize that to a certain extent, because either it's probably kind of for a couple different reasons. People sometimes don't want to talk about, well, this is how I succeeded, because you obviously, there's a lot of modesty in that. You're talking about how you were living out of your car, you were in a tough situation. It's not that, hey, look at me, look at what I was able to do. You want to inspire other people by your story. I like the call-in. I'm usually resistant to call-ins, but this call-in idea, I think I could get behind, because it is nice to be able to use your story to help other people and help them overcome. And I think that's something we could kind of work with in the off season. I also want to have a longer form interview at some point in the off season and talk about a lot of your story, because that is very inspirational, and there are so many stories like that. So I think that's part of what I want to do. Kind of similar idea. I want to talk with some of the folks that you and I both know in the sports world and talk about their journeys and do longer form interviews where we talk about their inspirational journeys. A lot of these guys that you're talking about, I also did look it up, and you're right. He got drafted by the Texans. He got cut in camp, and then he took a job as a brick salesman in the Houston area.
Brick said, you know what? I'm embarrassed. I tend to brag about my memory, and the fact that I said bricklayer versus brick salesman, it makes me a fraud. I'm sorry.
I think we've got to give you the credit on this one. The fact that you thought of the brick thing, and remember, the brick thing is incredible to me. I mean, salesman, maybe he laid a few too. I'm just looking at Wikipedia. Let's just assume he laid some while he was doing it. Probably as part of the sales pitch, you got to lay some.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'll be one of the first to ever tell you that I'll take accountability for my mistakes. And while that was not a big mistake, I still think the fact that he was a brick salesman. Let's compare. If you put that on a list and you had people say, "What would you rather be when you grow up, a brick salesman or an NFL kicker?" I think we can know the answer to that.
Yeah, I think it might be. We were talking about this in one of the earlier segments. I think it's hard to get anything to be unanimous nowadays, but I feel like that would be as close to unanimous as you could possibly get.
I absolutely agree.
But no, that's an amazing poll. I did not know that. I knew he had flirted with the NFL with another team. I didn't know that then he had a hiatus before he did the whole UFL thing. So yeah, it's just, I mean, I feel like this is really a category that's rife for a lot of that's ripe for a lot of inspirational stories. Like you said, there's got to be a ton of a 53-man roster. There's probably 53 of them. But the idea that kickers, just the journey that you guys have to have, I feel like that's a category that pretty much everybody has a story, maybe not exactly like yours, but an inspirational story.
Yeah, and you know what? It's easy for me because I'm friends with so many guys that have done it. I mentor as many people as I can. I take pride in certain things when it comes to trying to help people, but I think that I'm just more familiar with many of the kickers' journeys because I was a part of it, and I kind of walked in a parallel universe to that. But I mean, there are many other players, you know, at different positions and different sports and obviously different careers and everything like that. But it is something that is really cool to see because I can kind of compare it to mine and be like, man, even when I thought I was going through some really hard crap, somebody else went through something even harder than I did, and they've even succeeded way more than I have in such a short time.
That's the key to some of these inspirational stories, because I've done the same thing in my life. When you have a tendency to feel bad about yourself, or you say, okay, times are tough, you can always look at somebody else and say, well, look at what this person overcame. If they were able to do it, maybe I can be some small percentage of that. Maybe I can draw inspiration and use what they did or how they did it. And so I like where we're going with this, because I do think there's a lot of ideas to do in the off season to execute with some of these inspirational stories and giving people inspiration, because although some of these stories are harder to talk about, we did it in an earlier segment too. I talked with a Cowboys analyst, and we were talking about the whole Marshawn Nealon thing. That's a tough subject matter, but at the same time, you want to give it the light that it deserves, and understand that we're all human and we're all trying to do our best and to try to take the best out of these situations with your family, with your friends, with your own individual situation. So I think it's good that we're giving some motivation to folks here.
You know, like one thing I could tell you a million different scenarios of people that you would never believe that we all know are successful. And I just give you a slight example of it. Colonel Sanders, right? Everyone knows, like, Kentucky Fried Chicken. He was 69 years old before he ever sold his first freaking piece of chicken at Kentucky Fried Chicken because everyone told him it was silly, it was stupid, it was dumb, it's dumb, like stop, give up. 69 years old, okay? How many people you think would wait that long for their dream to happen and then see what it turned into?